Hi everyone, today we're going to look at the structure of an analytical essay with the incorporation of primary and secondary source interpretation. We'll be investigating the topic, what progress did women make in Europe during the period known as Enlightenment? And we'll be using a primary source we have collected from the library or the library's electronic databases, JustStore or EBSCO. The primary source I have selected for this presentation is On the Education of Women, written in 1719 by Daniel Defoe. Your own primary source will be different depending on what sources you found in your independent search. However, I will be using Defoe's source as an example to write an analytical history essay on the topic above. Now, many of you know how to write an essay, but even so, many history students do not analyze the historical sources to the required extent. Many tertiary students place primary source quotes within their essays with little or without any form of analysis afterwards. So today I'm going to create an analytical paragraph in the hope of stressing to history students that it is your own analysis that forms the core of every historical project. Standard structure of an analytical essay, as most of you know, is introduction, body, paragraph 1, 2, 3, or however many paragraphs you need, depending on your word limit and conclusion. Your introduction should introduce your argument and the points you will be discussing. Similarly, your conclusion will summarize the points and reinforce your argument. Yet it's the body of your essay that contains the most bulk. In a history essay, I always dedicate paragraph 1 to being the background paragraph. Background information is essential to any history project, and that's why background research forms such a major part of historical literacy. In the case of this topic, the background information is centered on the period of Enlightenment. But also remember not to get too carried away with your background information, and remember that it still has to be relevant to your thesis. You can see this from my example background paragraph on the screen. Yet, it is paragraph 2 and 3 that carry the most weight in a history essay, as they are the ones that focus on primary sources and your own analysis. It has been clear from a lot of educational surveys and investigations that history students are having trouble understanding primary sources and incorporating it into their essays in an analytical way. So I'm going to introduce a rule I apply when writing all analytical essays. It's called the TEACL rule, which stands for T is for topic sentence, E is for elaboration, Q is for quotes and evidence, A is for analysis, and L is for linking sentence. Let's look at the analytical paragraph I've written on the screen, analyzing the primary source on the education of women, and break it down. Firstly, what is the topic sentence? The topic sentence introduces readers to what is going to be discussed in the paragraph. It is the teaser for the sentences to come. Let's take a look at my topic sentence for paragraph 2 and ask yourselves, does it introduce the reader to the topic? Yes, in a way it does. It could be more precise, but overall it tells the reader that this paragraph will focus on the work of Daniel Defoe. The topic sentence is followed by sentences of elaboration, which tell us more about who Daniel was and what he achieved during the Age of Enlightenment. Elaboration sentences vary from one sentence to many sentences, depending on the length of your intended paragraph. Therefore, you do not have to have 133 words of elaboration as I did, but as you can see, I backed up my elaboration sentences with secondary sources who reinstated who Daniel was. This is essential as I did not get this information from the top of my head and therefore had to reference it in order to avoid plagiarism. After you feel you have provided enough elaboration, add your own primary source quotes or evidence. In my case, I have used the following quote. There should be taught all sorts of breeding suitable both for this genius and quality, and in particular music and dancing, which it would be cruelty to bar the sex of because they are their darling. But besides this, they should be taught languages and the greatest of speech, to read books, and especially history, and so to read them as to make them understand the world and be able to know the judge of things when they hear them. However, I cannot have this quote by itself. I have to analyze it. This is the most essential part of historical work. From the quote, I gained the following analyses. Defoe believed women should receive an education not to benefit themselves as individuals, so they could be agreeable companions to men. Defoe said women's rights are not for the woman's own benefit, but for the man, so they can have an accessorized lady to display in society as opposed to a person in their own right. Also note that I have used other sources to prove my point. E.g., Defoe's view is very similar to that of the fellow Enlightenment writer Jean-Jacques Rousseau, who wrote in Emile, 1762, that the education of women ought to be relative to men to please them, to be useful to them. Although he supported of Rousseau's view, there are strong differences between on the education of women and Emile. Whereas Rousseau labels women as slaves of love, Defoe disregards the use of women as stewards, cooks, and slaves, but still agrees that although women should be educated in a certain degree, they are still subordinate to men. It is important to incorporate your background knowledge and link it to your primary source to provide a powerful analysis can show your markers and readers that you understand historical connection of events and historical themes. This is evident towards my end of the paragraph when I say Defoe justified his stance with the nature of religion. On the education of women, Defoe writes that it is one of the most barbarous customs in the world, considering us as a civilized and a Christian country, that we deny the advantages of learning to women. Defoe argues that since God made nothing needless, women should be allowed to expand their knowledge and understanding which was given to them by God. This is evident in the primary source when Defoe states, a woman of sense and manners is defined as the most delicate part of God's creation, the glory of her Maker, and his great assistance to her singular regard to man, his darling creature, to whom he had the best gift either God could bestow or man receive. And 'tis the sorriest piece of folly in ingratitude in the world, to withhold from the sex the due lustre which the advantages of education gives to the natural beauty of their minds. Now it's time for the analysis, as you cannot leave the quote by itself. So therefore, I go on to say, O'Brien argues, which O'Brien is a secondary source, argues that Defoe's point of view, Christianity was linked with the concept of civilization, and that denying education to women should be considered uncivilized in itself. And here comes my analysis. Furthermore, the idea of an uneducated woman is compared to the devil, because in a Christian world, ignorance was considered to be an evil thing. Defoe uses religion as his main argument in why women's education must become a reality, so England could become a civilized and Christian country. This paragraph shows my background knowledge, my ability to find primary and secondary sources, and the ability to analyze and to support my own thesis. After I have provided my analysis with primary and secondary sources, both with references, I have to link my paragraph to the following one for a linking sentence, which in my case is, although Daniel Defoe argued that women's education should only benefit the man's well-being, his essay on the education of women allowed females to progress by having some form of education that, with his prompting, would develop over time. Linking sentence. The purpose of the linking sentence is to reinforce the argument and link to the next paragraph, which would be another primary source or another evidence that reinforces your thesis. When you have finished your essay, always remember to reference properly in the Oxford referencing style or the Harvard referencing style. Oxford is considered to be the main referencing style for the history discipline, but Harvard is also used for both completing a minor in history. For whatever referencing style you use, make sure you follow it completely and include the page numbers in order to avoid plagiarism. So that is the structure of the analytical essay, and I hope that's helped you understand how you have to analyze primary sources to reinforce your own thesis. And I want to cover some last points before we finish up today. Please remember that analytical history essays are all about analyzing primary sources to form your own conclusion, not merely mirroring the opinions of others. Always follow the structure of a history essay: introduction, body, conclusion. Always remember the Tika rule when writing a paragraph: topic, sentence, elaboration, quote, analysis, and linking sentence. Back your primary sources and your own opinions with credible secondary sources in order to cross-reference the accuracy of the information, and always reference your work. I can't stress that enough. Hopefully this session has been helpful for you in writing your own history essays, and feel free to leave me your questions. Thanks, bye!